Hey, how's it going, everybody? IronOverload.io hardcore podcast coming away. This is episode 79. Today we're going to do Ben Chow. And listen, this guy has a really interesting history. One of the things that we notice with him, Mobster, right off the bat, is he looks a hell of a lot younger. And he talks about it in one of his videos. And he's a lot older than you think if you guys look him up. So we're going to go over his life, his career. Very, very interesting. He's had a couple life-threatening situations.
Yes.
Really, really, I don't even think he should be alive based on what I've seen.
Yeah.
And we're going to go over his social media influence, which is really very enjoyable. I was looking at some of his videos. He's actually a joy to take a look at. Training diet, and we're going to speculate on his steroid use based on what he's talked about in the past. So he's currently 34 years old as we're doing this podcast. He doesn't look it. He looks like he's like 24. He looks like 10 years
Yeah.
younger. And he jokes about that when he does his videos. He retired a couple years ago, but he's still loved on social media. So he's still trying to keep his name out there. He was born an hour outside of London in the countryside. Mobster and I were having a laugh about that on the
Yeah.
pre-show because
Yeah.
that's kind of fascinating. And he actually talks about his childhood growing up with a sister who actually is very successful now. I think she went and became a lawyer. But he talked about that in one of his videos. It's very fascinating to hear his early life. So just some quick things. Um, he had some very life-threatening experiences, and he liked to be rebellious, as a lot of people do in life. And one of the things he loved was motorcycles. And I used to work with a guy, the same thing. He went out and got a motorcycle,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons he got the motorcycle was because it's dangerous. And that's the fun part of it all, is basically you have the coworker telling the my other coworker who got the motorcycle, it's dangerous, be careful. And the coworker basically said, I know. And it's like, duh, that's the point. So that's one of the things that Chow was
I've got a
interested.
buddy like that now that nearly died twice with motorcycle accidents, and I've been in the car with him, and he still drives like a crazy
Yeah,
motherfucker.
and
So
no
yeah, it sounds like
helmet,
they get
probably.
on
Yeah,
well. Yeah.
and then they don't wear a helmet because wearing a helmet would be a pussy wears a helmet.
Yeah.
So one day in 2015, on the way to the gym, where he was working at the time as a job, he collided head on with a car. Now, obviously, I've seen this before. I didn't see the accident, but I've driven past right when the accident happened
Mm.
before, where I drove and I saw like bike parts all over the road. And I saw people pulled over, and I saw two people, which were the people on the motorcycle, on the ground. One was not moving, and the other one was like trying to move. So
Yeah.
obviously, we're talking about probably one of those people were dead, and the other person
Yes.
had a tremendous amount of injuries. And neither
Yeah.
one of them were wearing a helmet, by the way. And I also saw another bicycle accident one time where it was this situation which happened to him, where he was completely covered in blood from head to toe. And I saw that
Oh.
as well. I witnessed that. And when the one I saw, it was in front of, it was like on a really, really busy street, and the ambulance couldn't even get there because of the traffic, was holed up. So people are like trying to get cars through so that the ambulance could get there. And this guy was basically not moving, head to toe, motorcycle in bits on the ground. So really, it's shocking that he even survived this, but he did. But he had to spend a week in the trauma unit with severe injuries. And he talks about it in one of his videos as well. He actually lost Mobster in his entire quad muscle, which was ripped
Mm.
out during the accident. So absolutely brutal injuries. He had to
Yeah.
actually move back in with his mom because he
Mm.
had to basically be cared for. So 6 weeks later, he started to rehab a little at a time. He was able to resume his gym activities. And a year later, he did a little competition. So he was able to come back pretty quickly from it. That's the nice thing about being young. That's a nice thing
Yeah.
about
God, yeah.
having access to good health care, where they
Yeah.
came, they threw you in the ambulance, took you to the hospital. You're in the hospital a week, and you're well cared for. And his mom obviously deserves a lot of credit as well for
Yes.
caring for
Yes.
him. You want to touch on that a bit, Mobster?
Yeah, I was just thinking, mate, when you're that badly injured, I could talk about my buddy. One of his accidents was he had the helmet on, but he had the chin strap in the wrong place. It wasn't on properly. And he was so lucky again. I mean, he's wheeling up a fucking street, up in the valleys here in South Wales, and crashed. And the chin strap pulled his face off. He was suffocating on his own blood. And in fact, even now, he's got a scar that runs from one ear over the top of his head down to the other ear, where they put his face back on. So all the flesh and the front was peeled off. And because they couldn't see what was going on, he was choking to death on his own blood. And the only reason he's alive from that accident is because there was a paramedic that lived in the street that managed to clear out his airway. So the other thing I was thinking in terms of his mum looking after him, this is how bad shit like that can be. You can't go to the toilet and have a shit or a piss unless, in this example, your mum helps you to the toilet. So having that kind of support, having that kind of network around you because you were doing stupid shit and you had a terrible accident is fucked up. The risk, Christ, Steve, I'm saying this like I've never done nothing stupid. Of course I fucking have. Steve has. We've all done stupid, youthful things. But the stress that you put your family under, the things that you look back and think, what the fuck was I thinking? I'm not invincible. And you're so lucky when you're younger that you can recover from things. But it's great that there was people there to help him. And obviously, as Steve said, great healthcare. That doesn't always happen, Steve. You completely depend on the surgeon, the hospital you go to, everything. Who's there to help you versus someone who's not quite as good. So it's fantastic. He could have died. Just put it that way. Steve's seen that. I've been close to these kind of things. I've had people fall down dead in the street when I was working that particular job. So yeah, that's fucked up shit. You're supposed to go when you're old, motherfuckers, not when you're young. But we do stupid stuff. That he was able to recover and come back and compete is a fucking amazing. It really is. It really is. Between 2017 and 2018, Steve, he had sepsis from a kidney infection. He refers to losing his best friend, Luke Sando. There are a bunch of gyms here in the UK, Steve, where Luke's picture is up on the wall. This guy was massively influential and a really, really nice guy to a lot of people. And I've seen a bunch of emotional videos when Luke passed away. So the idea that your best buddy's passing away it affected him so badly, Steve, he hit a new low in life. Didn't Steve wanting to compete, and he jumped onto the scene in the MP show in 2020 at the Texas State Championships, where he got second. I believe the Texas is a big competition. It's not up there with the New York Pro, but it's a growing competition. And if you do well there, you're going to do well elsewhere. He competed in 2 more shows, Steve, in 2021, winning the Lee Labrada Classic. That's another one. And third at the 2021 Texas Classic. So he's gone back to another Texas competition. One of those Texas ones, Steve, is a big one. At his absolute best, we're looking at 290 pounds at 6'1". And this is in bodybuilder shape, Steve. That would be big for a strong man. 290 pounds is a lot of meat on a lot of bone and at 6'1". So I mean, I've seen photographs, as Steve said. He looks younger, like Steve said. He's still the videos, etc. that I've looked at. He certainly looked in great condition. So we're going to talk about it. Talk about his social media influence.
So he's definitely big on social media, like places like Reddit. You could see transformation threads where people are debating about him. And I haven't seen a guy of his level, with his accomplishments, have so much social media influence that wasn't like a clickbaiter or something. So obviously, Chow does have a personality about him, which is, maybe exciting. And a lot of people like his stories and stuff. So I think that's part of the reason he's very well known. And also his transformations have been really insane. There's transformation threads about him where they show pictures where he literally 50, 60 pound difference. His
Yes.
Instagram
70,
page,
I think, was one example was 70, Steve. That's crazy.
yeah. So that's how you get good traction on these social media pages, because people are always looking to kind of see, how they can push their body, and they're kind of interested in this.
Yes.
His Instagram page is called Squat Like Chow, and has a big following, over 100,000. Several things he promotes: supplements, online coaching, bodybuilding, food. He promotes for Hostile, which is a collection of accessories, supplements, and brandware. So he's got that going. I wasn't able to find out if he's able to make a living through social media, but he definitely has a pretty good social media presence.
I'm going to say, do you know what, Steve? Because we're going to touch on this at the end of the show when we talk about his PD. I'm going to say used to, and still making something of a living, but because of the step back, which we will touch on later on in the show, I'm going to say not as much as he used to. On the other hand, Hostile is still a biggish brand, and it all completely comes down to what is being paid. There are very few listeners very few contracts out there that are $100,000 a year. They used to be, and we just talked about in another show how some supplement companies and things give you very short contracts, so you can do well for a month, and then you've got to be re-signed the next month, and so on and so forth. So you want to make sure, as always, as Ben appears to be doing, that there's income from outside the sport, as I'm going to say that he gets now, as well as the income that he still gets from inside the sport, but it might not be on the level that we would like it to be. Back to you, Steve.
So let's get into diet a little bit. And you would think, someone who's a coach, and charges people would know how to eat. So Chow follows something he kind of, I don't think I've ever seen this before. It's a 93-7 ratio, healthy food to junk ratio. So I've never seen 93-7.
It's a made up number. He's just saying, listen, guys, eat as healthy as you can and only go a little bit crazy now and again. The number is completely random, Steve. I'm telling you now.
Yeah.
The idea is that you can do, if it fits your macros and be a pro, forget it. No, if top pros need to eat clean, you can't. And again, it's inspiring younger people to eat clean, get healthy, eat to grow, and only having a treat now and again. That makes a lot of sense to me. So, yeah, I'd be very surprised if it's specifically 93-7, Steve. Very surprised.
So his strategy with the macros is low protein, moderate carb, and low fat diet. So it computes the 150 by 250 by 20 on training days. And that's his training day diet. So, flies in the face of, you've got to get like 300, 400 grams of protein, blah, blah, blah. So you're only getting 150. So that's interesting. And what's interesting about this diet, it's very similar to like a Mediterranean or a Blue Zone diet that's more heavier in carbs. And that's kind of fascinating on that. So it might have something to do as well for, with his kidney and sepsis history. Because sometimes people who've had kidney issues have to eat a certain way. So it might have something to do with that as well. But typical meal plan for him: white fish, brown rice, broccoli, or chicken breast, white rice, and asparagus. So pretty simple. I wasn't really, it wasn't anything more complicated than that. But 7% with a 93-7. So 7% would be cheat, So we're talking less than 1 every 10 meals is a cheat meal. So that's pretty good. I'd say 1 out of 11 approximately would be a cheat meal. So, so we're talking, let's say you have 4 meals a day. Every 3 or 4 days, you're going to have 1 cheat meal. So that's pretty good. Go ahead, Mobster, with the training.
Yeah, I mean, on the training, right? So the following is not a standard workout. In fact, he makes a comment both in the video itself and in the commentary for the video where he says, I like to control the variables. And back in UK, everything is controlled. The time that I go to the gym that I'm using to training, the equipment I'm going to use, everything, meaning specifically staying on plan, probably working from a logbook. This is the plan that I'm going to be training it now. This is the plan in 4 days. This is the plan in 2 weeks, and so on and so forth. So very, very controlled. So the following is not, as I say, a standard workout. What happened was he was doing a tour. He's over there in the States, in Texas, visiting for whatever reason, probably promotional work, etc. Steve, doing the store stuff, promoting for Hostile, whatever. And he goes to this particular gym. He's been asked, come down and train with us, buddy. We'd like to see you at this gym, etc., etc. And it's going to be a mobster of a fucking workout. And he said, you know what? I just decided to go with the flow. So, but I like the workout, Steve, which is why I'm mentioning it. So he went pull downs to stack with a loose style. We've emphasized on a couple of shows, you and I recently, dropping the weight and using a much stricter style, working on my muscle connection. This wasn't that kind of workout. This was heavy ass fucking weight, to quote Ronnie Coleman. Dumbbell rows, Steve. Dumbbell rows, one arm at a time, to 250 pounds. These were chrome, man. I was like, where can I get me some of those? They were doing they did a back offset, mind, with 200 pounds for 10 reps. I did 200 pounds for 12 today, Steve. But I'm like, where can I get me a 250? The 250 was a fucking dumbbell, to say the least. Then they did something a little bit more detail orientated there. High pulley cable row. This was almost on one of those multi-angle type cable machines. They sat down. We're only talking a few plates on the stack here, Steve. And this was really emphasizing the tie-ins for the muscle, the teres major, that little bit where the lat ties into the armpit, and so on and so forth. You've moved huge weights you're going to have some impact, but it's not isolating the muscle. It's not super strict. So that exercise, the number 3 was super, super strict. I didn't see them doing pullovers on the video, but pullovers were mentioned. And again, that's all armpit. That's where the muscles attaching both into the armpit and down onto the rib cage. And I suspect, Steve, although it wasn't on the video, it would be done slower and with more contraction, more mind muscle connection. And then finally, back to another heavy exercise, probably just to fuck themselves up, finish the workout brutal. And that's the whole thing that came across to me, is this was not an easy, detailed mind muscle connection workout. The final one was T-bar rows. So again, decent weight. Honestly, Steve, the most impressive thing was the form. They were using good form, non-stop reps. There wasn't no throwing the weights around. And that was with the 250 and the dumbbells. And that is a big fucking weight. What do you think about that kind of workout, Steve?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I think he's very aggressive. It strikes me as, throughout his 20s, very, very aggressive when it comes to training and just pushing the boundaries and stuff, which is pretty common. I think I was from my late 20s all the way into my mid 30s, really extremely hardcore workouts, throwing weights around like a gorilla. And that's what happens. You can get away with it when you're young. Once you get older, though, you have to start changing stuff. But
Yes.
again, we have that connection, when it comes to, the rebellious and the there is no tomorrow type of mentality. So yeah,
I
so
think what he
yep.
did there, Steve, was allowing himself, this is the guys who've invited me down. I'll do their workout just for the change of pace. But normally, as I say, listeners, much more controlled, much stricter environment, much stricter timing of the food. When I've had this amount of food, that's when I can go to the gym. This is what I'm training today, so I need to go to this particular gym to use this particular piece of equipment. So way, way more control. And arguably, maybe that's what's got him to a certain particular place, especially when it comes to being on stage, having that control. I've even said the same thing for myself. I like throwing the big fucking weights around, but I would have to live according to the rules of a competition if I was still competing. So I have to do it a certain particular way, and that sense of structure can actually work for a lot of people. It depends on your personality type. Some people will grow motherfucking huge and whatever else on a loose style. Other people need it to be super, super strict. So he's normally way more control. But it was an interesting workout. Read out the next bit, Steve, because we're going to talk about specifically what's happened possibly as a result of what we've called steroid abuse. And I think as Steve reads this out, you'll kind of agree because it's easy for us to say, but these are Ben's own words. So read this bit out, Steve.
Yeah, and he announced this when he announced his retirement. And he says, look, push too hard, something I've spent the last 6 to 8 months liberating hard, and something that I've battled back and forth with. My love for bodybuilding and challenging myself burns brighter than ever, but I have to be realistic and honest. I have to recognize where I am in life, what is important in the long run, and where I can add value to those around me. As many of you know, I had a kidney infection in 2017 and 2018, which progressed to sepsis. This caused a lot of stress and damage to my kidney function, which I have spent the last 4 years being very cautious to my approach in bodybuilding, allowing me to continue to push without regressing further. The reality is, being 290 plus pounds, taking PEDs, and redlining my body is just not sensible strategy or something I need to do. I am in an incredibly fortunate position in both life and business, and I am now able to accept this, embrace this new path in my life. This, of course, very bittersweet for me, but I am excited to redirect my time and passion to my family and clients and be the best man, husband, father, and coach I possibly can. So,
Yeah, look.
yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
again, with the idea that a professional bodybuilders, we know that it's sexy, and I use that word in like an advertising type term. We know it's sexy to discuss crazy PED levels. We know it's kind of almost perverse kind of fun to guesstimate what top pros are using, and we know it gets traction for us and for other people that do these shows. But there's a certain sense of reality that needs to come in. We also are aware of, possibly because of the access to information, who dies. We get aware of the stacks. We get aware of the dangers of diuretics and insulin use and DMP and all these other crazy things that we talk about on these shows and other shows talk about as well. But the reality is an issue here that he ended up with sepsis, with liver damage, kidney damage, because kidney specific issues with kidney function, specifically because of the sepsis. So you go, okay, right, is it worth the risk for me, in his case, of continuing to do what I've done in order to get to this particular place and be as successful as I am? And the answer was no. Maybe he worked out it wasn't worth risking any more issues because he wasn't going to be Mr. Olympia. Maybe because he touches upon it, there was opportunities outside of bodybuilding that were making more than enough. So it was never about being rich from being an athlete. I can do other things that more than pay my bills. And ultimately, and I touched upon this, Steve, there's an element of being selfish. When you're younger, you're probably even worse. And that's this idea that I do what I do because I love it and I don't give a fuck what's going to happen. Reality bites you on the ass. You get a little bit older, you have a missus, you have kids, you have family that love you, that helped you, and you are maybe letting them down a little bit. So, you know, the risk reward thing has to be weighed up. And arguably, he made that decision. He said, this is what I need to do now. And if I push harder, if I keep on pushing harder, I'm going to maybe make myself worse. And he had to make that decision. What's really good here, Steve, and we're going to guess what we think he's been doing in the past that's actually ended up causing these issues, is he's putting it out there. You don't really get to see this enough. We've just recorded a show prior to this one where the person is super honest, and that's actually kind of made them attractive in terms of people following them on social media, etc., etc. I like the fact that young people, because that does seem to be his core audience, Steve, like what he does, like the transformations, but it's great that you can have this influence on younger people saying, I did what I did, I pushed it, it's caused me problems, and I don't want to upset the wife, I don't want to upset the kids, I don't want to upset my mum and my dad. I've pushed too hard and I've made myself ill doing so. And if I continue to push real hard, how many years am I going to knock off my life? And he's made that decision. That takes a big man with big balls, Steve, to put that information out there, to make those kind of decisions. And it shows a great level of maturity, which is fantastic. Now, Steve and I in the pre-show and the research, etc., said, look, we're going to put out the kind of information that we think would have pushed him into that particular place. So this is not one of those, you could do this and you could look like Ben. This is what Ben may have done in order to arguably potentially give himself these issues. Is it unique to Ben? No, no. There are some people that get away with taking very little and look amazing, and there are other people that need to make decisions that do crazy amounts in order to look just mediocre, sometimes amazing, of course. But again, we can guess, Steve. I'll do a few here. 1,200 milligrams of testosterone. That's not unusual. We've seen examples of stacks, Steve, with up to 2,000 milligrams of testosterone. 1,000 milligrams of tren, ACE. That is kind of common. I don't think we'd be too far off the mark, Steve. We know that there's a bunch of pros out there that have gone this far. They've even admitted to going that far. It's tren, 1,000 milligrams a week is not healthy. It will turn you into a beast if you have the genetics, but it's not healthy. 1,250 milligrams of masteron propionate. Masteron in a competitive bodybuilder cycle as a hardener is not at all unusual. Give it the next couple, Steve, and tell us what you think on the one so far as well.
Yeah, 150 micrograms clean. This is one that, it's very, very harsh on the body, but it's a great fat burner, great for boosting metabolism. 100 milligrams a day Winstrol, 125 milligrams a day Anavar, both orals. But Winstrol, a lot of times you can also you can inject it or drink it. But same thing. They're both liver toxic. They're both going to hit you, your organs, including your kidneys, pretty hard, as all these steroids will.
Yeah.
Tremendous strain on the kidneys when you use anabolic steroids. But these are going to be good for, cutting, for hardening, for vascularity, and all that good stuff. And then you got the HGH and insulin. 20 IUs per day HGH, 10 IUs per day insulin. This is what guys would be using ahead of competitions. It's really one of those things that would cause the growth. And as he said in his retirement post, where he talked about, look, I'm 290 plus pounds and he's 6'1". That's a big man. And being lean 290, a lean 290, how do you get like that? It's the HGH and it's the insulin. And that's going to push your body to grow beyond what it could ever be capable of doing. But look, at the end of the day, he abused steroids when he was doing the, at his peak, when he was in 2021, Lee Labrada Classic, winning it, getting third at the 2021 Texas Classic. Those aren't easy competitions, Mobster. NPC show. Yep.
Steve, he'd already had sepsis issues prior, 2016, 2017. Yeah. So 4 years later, he's still competing, listeners, with the argument potential in order to get into what is a relatively big competition, great shape at 290 pounds, and you already had issues in the past. There's something else, Steve, I want to expand on a little bit, and that touches upon the motorcycle thing again, right? So it's the risk behavior, the rebellious aspect. Okay, there's almost a thing. I mean, just Steve and I say this just because we're a bit over 30 now, me more so than Steve, of course, and that we do certain particular things as a fuck you in life. We do certain things that we don't, where we don't think about the future. We don't think about the missus, the kids, the mortgage, and whatever else. And occasionally we all have these kind of mad, crazy moments. It's interesting that Ben's very controllable in terms of his training and psyche and food and all the rest of that stuff for training typically, versus doing the rebellious stuff versus the risk reward behavior when it comes to PED use and so on and so forth. And I think there's it might be just a thing of being, in an amazing shape, being up on stage with a crowd screaming your name and whatever else. And those moments you can get greedy for them. So it's interesting for me that you have that particular aspect. But finally, he's only 31, Steve, so he's not an old man, coming to the realization that perhaps I don't need to do those things anymore, and I'm risking certain things in life, and I'm upsetting or arguably doing things that could upset my family, my friends, those people around me, even the fans, because the fans love him, Steve, and especially the younger fans love him. So does he want, would his fans be upset if he died? Of course they would. Would the family and friends be up? Yes, absolutely. And then again, it's the risk reward. Listen, right? Good the money in bodybuilding, as good as it can sometimes sound, it's fuck all compared to other sports. Multi-millions, multi-tens of millions in some examples. And arguably the risk reward is there. These are where you can get your neck broken. You can have brain injuries. You can be paralyzed. And they're paying you $30 million a year. There's almost an argument to be made for that. The biggest prize in bodybuilding right now is going to be next year's Arnold, and it'd be $500,000. This year's Olympia will be $400,000. That's for a year with the risk reward behavior. Maybe it's better than the average man's income, absolutely, but the average man's not risking life and limb and dying or whatever else because of drug use in order to be a better mechanic or whatever else. So I like the fact that maybe it's a question of him becoming mature, sensible, realizing that people would miss him, etc., etc. So yeah, it's interesting, of course, as always. What do you think, listeners, especially younger listeners? We want to hear from you. Comment below, comment on the forums. Let us know what you think. Ben Chow made the right decision, or would have you carried on pushing it? Please note, we are not doctors' opinion of ours. It's our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment